because they have to create a database and keep track of all of this stuff. And they're going to have to deal with negotiating, mediating between divorced parents when one wants one and one wants the other thing for their kid, in a class, out of a class. So this school system now has to keep track of all of this. So some secretary is madly tearing her hair out trying to figure out how to organize all of this stuff now. And that's a cost that will take away from the education of our kids in classrooms. And frankly, I resent that, because I want my taxpayer dollars going into educating kids, not into organizing how people can pull them out of public education. And this bill, by the way, affects public education, which includes our Catholic school system in Alberta. But my understanding is it does not affect the charter schools and the private schools, because they are defined differently under the School Act. So we now put something in this Act that flows over onto and into our classrooms. They now have to notify parents and get instructions back from parents about pulling their kids out of school. There's still a very vague definition about what could be considered a subject matter that is dealing explicitly with primarily and explicitly with religion, human sexuality, and sexual orientation. And when I spoke in Committee of the Whole, I talked about how a division, religion is often a sincerely held belief. So we have very little basis for definition to understand what we have now subjected our schools to and the problems that they will have to deal with as a result of what's been brought up here. And I think families are important. We look for families to bring stability into our communities, and stability in our communities means generally stabilities in our cities and in our wider society. But where I differ, I think, is what my definition of a family is, and that very core unit that starts to create that stability. Because in my fabulous constituency of Edmonton Centre, one of the reasons it's fabulous is the people that live there and the way they choose to build their family units and build their community and build our city and build our society. And I am not willing to make that definition, as I have been reading about, as a natural family, which seems to be some definition that doesn't match very well what I see out in my community. And I think that's very short-sighted and does not move us forward as a more tolerant society. So back to the classroom. So we're now allowing people to pull their kids out of school through some definition that's not very clear around religion, human sexuality, and sexual orientation. But we don't get into those larger issues now of dealing with difference and tolerance and analysis and critical thinking that we're supposed to be bringing our kids through this system for. I mean, how do we get there if kids are pulled out of class whenever a topic might be offensive or troublesome for their parents? So I've already talked about different definitions of religion and religious instruction. So where do we end up 10 or 20 years down the road when we look to what is our standard of education in Alberta and what have we done with our society? Have we taken children in and taught them how to do critical analysis, to deal with difficult subjects, to be challenged around their tolerance? That is how you become a stronger society. When we look at what's going to lead us forward into a new economy, they talk about creative economies, they talk about knowledge-based economies. That is about tolerance and diversity. That is about creating communities that people want to move to have their families in whatever form that is, to build those communities, those cities, and those societies that will make us exciting for years to come and give us an alternate form of energy, if you will, and to diversify our economy. So this starts to ripple out in a way that I think was not anticipated here. One of the things I was looking at was, and I'll quote from this if I may, if we ignore things like abortion rights, same-sex marriage, employment equity, racial discrimination, and hate speech, how will we teach our children to ask hard questions when their liberty, equality, their dignity, and their privacy are under threat? How will they know when they're being treated unfairly? We must prepare them to ask the hard questions that people living in democracies must ask. Indeed. And that is from Cultivating Habits of Democracy, Asking the Hard Questions by Danielle McLaughlin from the Canadian Civil Liberties Education Trust. We still haven't particularly dealt with the issue of impromptu questions, and although the government amendment does indicate that it should not apply to incidental or indirect references to religion, religious themes, human sexuality, or sexual orientation in a course of study, I am not convinced that that is going to solve the problem that has been identified in so much debate. I think we have, sorry, let me check my notes. Yeah, we ended up putting in human rights what only belongs in the School Act, and I'm not convinced that it is appropriate there. I'm definitively not convinced that it is appropriate to put it there. The issue is not one of parental control at home. It's what happens when we are now enshrining those parental rights into a public school system that is funded by taxpayer dollars. And that public school system has farther-reaching effect. And I think that is the issue that we've created, possibly unknowingly, but hopefully not deliberately through this Act. So, in the end, I'm not going to be supporting this bill. I started out with such hope and such enthusiasm and even such joy that finally sexual orientation would be included under human rights, and I could quit asking the poor minister when he was going to do it. Yay! I thought this was a point of celebration for me and for many in my community. And I have come, whatever it is now, 6 weeks later, to urging my colleagues to vote against this bill. It does not do what it purported to do. It, in fact, creates two levels of discrimination, and although it includes sexual orientation under prohibited grounds in one section, it then goes ahead and says, but you can discriminate on the grounds of sexual orientation in the school system by pulling your kids out of any class where it might be mentioned. And that, to me, is horrific. That is one step forward and two steps back. And we should be beyond that in this province. And frankly, I don't think that intolerance is actually in the wider Alberta population. I think that intolerance is here on this floor. And that is my greater disappointment with the process that I have seen develop here over the last 6 weeks. And I think as well we have engaged teachers in schools in activities that are far beyond what should have been appropriate and expected of them, and we have placed them, I think we will see in the future, in an untenable position. I want to make sure that I thank again all of those who wrote and Twittered and stayed engaged with this and came tonight, came the other night, stopped me on the street, the seniors that stopped me at the seniors' teas this afternoon and last week, that engaged on Facebook, that created their own websites, that went to our websites here. For all of you, I thank you again for your engagement. It's very important that you do that. It's very important that you continue to do this. And particularly for the students, you guys are going to vote soon. You may be voting in the next election. Pay attention. You've got sharper memories than some of the older generation, and I'm expecting you to remember what happened in this exchange. And you'll be able to hang on to that information for the two and a half years you need to hang on to it for. So those are the bulk of the comments that I wanted to make. There was just a couple of other interesting emails that I got along the way that I want to highlight as I go. And one woman wrote to me and said, I think I can identify her. I won't give her name, wanted me to know that she was currently a student at the University of Alberta. She did not agree with Bill 44 and did not agree that parents should have the right to pull their kids out of human sexuality courses. Had she not been taught about human sexuality within the Edmonton Public School Board, she would not have known that she could escape a sexual abuser. And that had been very helpful information to her in her life. And I thought, okay, hadn't thought of that one as a plus for why we need to have that kind of information available. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.